very much. I see devotee Parth Nimbalkar, Prabhu, or Mataji. Hare Krishna, thank you for joining us today for our Sunday Feast lecture. So I will go ahead and proceed. So today I was hoping to speak about the advent of Sri Advaita Acarya, who will be, for our location in Portland, the appearance day is tomorrow. But since we don't gather at the temple on weekdays, I thought I would take advantage and speak about him and his tattva as best as I can. So let's start. Om Agyantimarandasya Jananjana Shlakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpati Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suta Devi Pranami Hari Priye Shivancha Kalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhubi Evacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you very much. You can see the screen and hear me okay, correct? Yes?
Yes, Prabhu, you can see screen, Prabhu.
If there's an issue, you can send me some message through chat or whatever you desire, okay? To minimize this, the control bar. So let me try to hide it. Okay. So tomorrow is the advent of Sri Advaita Acarya, one of the Panchtattva. So I wanted to take this opportunity to speak about him. And like any intimate, eternal associate of the Lord, his pastimes are, and his mood is beyond my capability to try to explain. But out of desire for service to Sacinandana Sacinandana Srila Prabhupada, I seek your blessing so that I can speak a little bit about him. There are books written about Sri Advaita Acarya. And then there are reference work, which is Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Bhagavat, Bhakti-Ratnakar. They all have extensive sections about Sri Chaitanya, about Sri Advaita Acarya. So we'll try to just speak a very small portion about Advaita Tattva. So Krishna says, Janma karma chame divyamevam yoveti tatata. That just try to understand the truth of my appearance and my activities. Because Krishna Lila, Chaitanya Lila, the pastimes of his intimate associates like Advaita Acarya, in order to actually appreciate them, one has to understand tattva. One has to understand the truth behind them. And then one can understand the various activities and pastimes of such associates. So my focus was going to be on trying to understand Advaita Tattva. And like I said, it's beyond me, but I'm just going to repeat what our acharyas, and Srila Prabhupada in particular, have spoken. So thank you for your patience. So we've read this. This is called the Panchtattva mantra. And we chant that before we do anything in our devotional life. Because Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is mercy incarnate, and so are his associates, and they enable us to chant the great mantra for deliverance, the Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, that Maha mantra. They give us the qualification to chant such a powerful mantra that attracts Krishna himself. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates form the Panchtattva. And so this is a important verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela. Chaitanya Charitamrita is divided into three, in a way, three volumes: Adi Leela, Madhya Leela, Antya Leela. The beginning, the middle, and the final aspect of Gauranga Mahaprabhu's Leela. So this verse tries to explain the essential truth about the Panchtattva. It's the Tattva. Panchatattva Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Surupakam Bhakta Avataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Saktikam. Let me offer my obeisance unto Lord Shri Krishna, who has manifested himself in five as a devotee, expansion of a devotee, incarnation of a devotee, pure devotee, and devotional energy. So, so five aspects. So here's the Panchtattva, this beautiful painting. This is Gauranga Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is Lord Nityananda. This is Sri Gadadhar Pandit. This is Sri Advaita Acarya, about whom we're going to try to speak a little bit. And this is Srivas Thakur. So altogether, five, Lord Krishna descended through Mahaprabhu in five forms. So we have the Bhakta Rupa, right? This verse says, forgive me, this verse says Bhakta Rupa. So Bhakta Rupa here is translated as the form of the devotee. And that's Mahaprabhu. And then we have Bhakta Sarupa, expansion of a devotee. And that's Sri Nityananda Prabhu. Bhakta Rupa, Bhakta Sarupa. And then we have Bhakta Avatara, the incarnation of a devotee. And that's Sri Advaita Acarya. So these three are considered Vishnu Tattva. And then we have Bhaktakyam, known as a devotee. And that is Sri Srivas Thakur. And then we have Bhakta Shaktikam. So Shakti is energy, the energy of Bhagwan. And that is Sri Gadadhar Pandit. So those are the five Panchtattvas. Now, like I said, we're going to explore Bhakta Avataram, which is Sri Advaita Acarya. And here's the two kind of like most philosophically statements about Advaita Tattva, or the nature of Advaita Acarya. Who is he? In order to appreciate somebody, one has to know who he is. So this is once again from Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela, chapter 1. And in here, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, Maha Vishnu Jagat Karta Mayaya Srajati Adaha Dashyavatare Vayam Advaita Acharya Ishvara. Lord Advaita Acharya is the incarnation of Maha Vishnu, whose main function is to create the cosmic world through the actions of Maya. through the actions of Maya. So I will just display that verse. And Srila Prabhupada, within this verse, does not give much comment, but there are other sections where there's huge amount of comment on this. So the idea here is that Lord Vishnu glances over material energy, right? We know about Maha Vishnu and how material manifestation comes around by the glance of Vishnu onto what's called pradhan, unmanifested material energy. And then creation starts from there. And then, so he does that by glancing over this unmanifested nature, pradhan. And Advaita Acarya is considered that expansion who actually assists in that activity of material creation through the agency of Maya, the internal potency of the Lord. Now, the important point here is to understand that the most common understanding in this world is that matter is the totality of cause, both the material cause and what is called by the philosophers and the acharyas the efficient cause. That matter causes all manifestation. But our acharyas, specifically Baladev Vidyabhushan, who is a great acharya in our disciplic succession, explains that material nature is actually inert. And so it cannot be the cause of matter. Matter cannot cause matter. Nor is it the ultimate cause of matter. Because he gives an example that we see throughout our sojourn in the material world, that there's so many wonderful arrangements where things just happen. The sun rises, warms up the planet, everybody feels better, rains come at the right time to grow crops, etc. All this, our experience in the material world indicates that something doesn't happen there has to be some intelligence behind something occurring. Some arrangement has to be made. Like we never see a computer assembling itself. It needs somebody to design software and modules and machines and this and that. So the essential idea that our acharyas explain is that matter cannot act unless impelled by a living being. Most fundamentally, that matter does not come from matter. Matter is a product of spirit. And it is due to the entrance of the Lord in the form of Maha Vishnu into the material manifestation by the will of Lord Sri Krishna and Balaramji that this occurs. And that's essentially what this verse is trying to convey. Okay, so it's saying that Advaita Acarya, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami states that Advaita Acarya is an incarnation of Mahavishnu. And I will come back to, okay, that's all nice and theoretical, but what does it mean practically about Advaita Acarya? So we'll come back to that. Then the second verse here that explains Advaita Tattva is this one. Advaitam Harina Advaitatat Acharyam Bhakta Samshanat Bhakta Avataram Ishamtam Advaita Acharyam Ashraya. Because he is non-different, Advaita Harina Advaita Da. Because he's non-different from Hari. Hari, Srila Prabhupada explains in Canto 1, Chapter 3, in the Purusha Avatar, Hari is Garbhodaksha Vishnu, sometimes also Shirodaksha Vishnu, but one of the Purusha Avatars. And that he is non-different from Hari, therefore he's called Advaita. And then he's called Acharya, Advaita Acharya, because he propagates the cult of devotion, is what it's translated as. Propagates the cult of devotion. So although he is incarnation or expansion of Mahavishnu or Hari, for the welfare of all of us, those that are embedded in this material world, he comes as the servant of Hari. And he shows through his personal example, that's why he's called Acharya. Acharya is one who demonstrates by his behavior how to be the servant of the Lord. Srila Prabhupada often said the real qualification of Acharya is that he's the topmost servant of Supreme. So Advaitam and Acharya. Bhakta Avataram Ishamta. Bhakta Avataram is incarnation of the Lord's devotee. And we'll explore that. Advaita Acharyam Ashraya. So Ashraya means to take shelter of. Advaita Acharya, I take shelter of Advaita Acharya. That's what Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is stating. So we're trying to remember the Parents' Day of this great personality, which is going to come tomorrow. And here's a nice picture from Shida Mahapur, how they're very nicely celebrating the appearance of Advaita Acharya with nice Abhishek. So Advaita Acharya appeared on this earth in a place called Navagram, which is currently called Bangladesh. And his family moved relatively rapidly to Shantipur. Now, I'm not going to explore the childhood pastimes. Like I said, there are many, many pastimes of Advaita Acharya. I will focus on the tattva of Advaita Acharya for my own benefit. Because once we understand that, we understand Advaita Acharya's pastimes. So he had wonderful devotionally inclined parents. And his other name was Shri Kamalaksha. And Kamalaksha means, eyes like lotus flowers. So he was Mahaprabhu's senior. He was born in 1434 AD. That's when he appeared. Well before Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he is described as Kamalaksha also. So when his parents left this world, he went to Gaya, just like Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to Gaya for the Shraddha ceremony of his father, for the rites of honoring the departed souls. So he went to Gaya, and then eventually he arrived in Vrindavan. And as a result of arriving in Vrindavan, he became absorbed in the worship of Krishna. But he understood, because of absorption, that something unique was about to happen in Navadvip. So he returned from Vrindavan to Navadvip and then eventually to Shantipur, his hometown. And people were extremely happy to see him because of his wonderful qualities and his sweetness and his compassion. But then he himself was not so happy because he was seeing that there was unhappiness due to more of a connection with matter than with spirit. And therefore, he saw that people in general were suffering in material life. And so he became more absorbed in the scriptures, and he opened up a school where he would be able to repeat what he heard about from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, trying to emphasize that the essence of the message was to become a devotee of the Lord, and in that way become happy. At about the same time that he was engaging in this activity, Madhavendra Puri, also called Puripad in the scriptures, a great Acharya, had a dream in which his Gopal deity requested him to go obtain sandalwood paste. And so Puripad traveled to Jagannath Puri through a road in West Bengal. And so he eventually arrived in Shantipur. And he actually stayed in the house of Advaita Acharya. And Advaita Acharya saw when someone's absorbed in pure devotional service, it cannot be hid. It comes through very nicely. And it affects everyone around them, especially those that have an open heart. And so he saw that, and he saw the ecstasies of Puripad. Now, most advanced devotees will keep that internal because that's very intimate. But because of Advaita Acharya's great origin and his great purpose, Puripad allowed that to be seen by Advaita Acharya. Even though Advaita Acharya is considered Advaita incarnation of Hari, Maha Vishnu, even he was moved by that. And in order to demonstrate the importance of initiation to everyone else in the material world, he took initiation from Puripad, just like Krishna Balaram did in the Ashrama Sandapani Muni. Likewise, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did likewise. So, so that was very important for Advaita Acharya, that interaction with Puripad. And then Puripad moved on in his journey to acquire sandalwood paste for his Gopal deity. So, especially after such an event, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami and Chaitanya Bhagavat Vrindavan Das Thakur describe, Kintu sarva loka dekhe Krishna bahir mukha Vishaya nimagana loka dehi paya dukha. But Sri Advaita Acharya Prabhu felt pained to see all the people without Krishna consciousness simply merging in material sense enjoyment. He felt pained to see this. But the Siddhanta Maharaj said, there's no scarcity in this world. The only scarcity is lack of Krishna consciousness. And that is the vision of a pure devotee and an eternal associate of Lord. They can pinpoint the essence, the pinprick in society, as Srila Prabhupada called it. The hole from which things are occurring that are causing distress is lack of Krishna consciousness. Now, here's a very interesting point to ponder. So Advaita Acharya is who? He is Advaita. He is expansion of Mahavishnu. And how do the jivas in the material world manifest? How do we come into this material world? We come into this material world through the glance of Mahavishnu into the material world, into pradha, etc., into matter. So all the jivas come from Mahavishnu. So they have a very intimate connection with Mahavishnu, with Bhagwan, in that way. Like if some other family is suffering, some other society is suffering, I don't feel the pain so much because they're not necessarily connected to me. But if my relative is suffering, this extended form of self, as Srila Prabhupada calls in Bhagavad Gita. If my relative is suffering, I feel great pain. Now imagine if you expand that to the pain that Mahavishnu feels and Advaita Acharya. And when I understand that, then you can have a tinge of appreciation of the pain Advaita Acharya felt. So this is very important. This is why understanding that he is Advaitam, non-different than Hari, Mahavishnu, is so important because he can feel the pain of the jivas unlike us. And he observed that because of lack of relationship with Bhagwan, no bhakti, that they were suffering. So he promised, I must make Krishna appear to expend this. Why? Because Krishna ends Bhagavad Gita with Sarva Dharma Pratiyaje Mamekam Sharan Vaj. Hamtam Sarpapivo Mukshishami Masucha. Abandon all varieties of religion, just surrender to me. But what does that surrender imply? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he asked Ramananda Roy to tell the essential tattva, Ramananda Roy said this verse, Sarva Dhamma Pratyaje, our prime verse that's often quoted by devotees. And Mahaprabhu said, go deeper. And somebody asked Bhaktisanta Maharaj, this is the verse that we always quote from Gita. Why would Mahaprabhu say, go deeper? And Bhaktisanta Maharaj said, what does it tell you about a jiva that his father has to ask him to love him? What does it tell us about ourselves if Bhagwan has to ask us, please love me? Sharanam, please surrender to me. Sharanam is love. Bhaktisanta Maharaj said, that's why, Mahaprabhu advented. He advented to show us how to actually love. Sharana means love. Rapana means love. Without love, there's no surrender. So seeing the condition of the world, he began to think about, Advaita Acharya began to think about this. And he thought, if Krishna appears to distribute love of God, then people will actually be truly happy. And, with this idea, he engaged in an activity with his body and mind. Yanhara Tulsajala, Yanahar Hankara, Swagana Sahite, Chaitanya Avatara. He worshipped Krishna with tulsi leaves and water of the Ganges and called for him in a loud voice. Thus Lord Chaitanya appeared on earth accompanied by his personal associates. Very wonderful. Very, very wonderful. This tells us the power of Tulsi Maharani being such an intimate associate. We see that in the pastime of Sri Haridas Thakur. So by offering Tulsi leaves, Ganga Jal, here's an artistic rendition. There's Advaita Acharya, there's Shalgram Shila, there's the Ganga, and he's offering Ganga Jal, and he's offering Tulsi leaves. Shiv Sinathai Sacinandana Dev Ki Jai. You can all have darshan of the Lord and his pujari. So this is very interesting. Advaita Acharya is trying to make the Lord appear. Now we know Krishna is independent. And he's not, Bhaktisanta Maharaj used to say, Krishna is not Bhagwan is not our order carrier. So how is this occurring? So here's a nice pastime where we can try to understand this. And this is from the pastime of Maharaj Ambarish and Dhruvas Muni. And by just understanding this, so Dhruvas Muni, we know, is advanced Acharya, advanced Vaishnava. And Vaishnavas sometimes act in sometimes confusing ways for the average person like us to understand. So sometimes he acts in such ways that he enhances the glories of other devotees. And that's nice. We should always take it like that. We should not try to find fault with an advanced soul like Dhruvas Muni. Many, many times in Bhagavatam, he's interlaced in amazing pastimes of the Lord, where because of something he says or does, it enhances the magnificence of the Lord and the tremendous qualities of his devotees. So Durvas Muni offended Maharaj Ambrish, and most of you know that pastime, so I won't go into that. And therefore, Durvas Muni got the reaction of suffering because of that offense. And ultimately, he had to approach Lord Narayan, as this chapter explains, and said, you can deliver those who have no qualification, please help me. So Bhagavan says, Aham bhakta paradhina, hi ashvat antara iva divrija. So he says to the Brahmana, meaning Druvas, I'm completely under the control of my devotees. I'm not independent. Aham bhakta pradhina. This most essential. When we understand this, we understand Advaita Acharya's promise. So he says, I'm completely under the control of my devotees. Indeed, I'm not at all independent because my devotees are completely devoid of material desires. I sit only within the core of their hearts. What to speak of my devotee? Even those who are devotees of my devotees are very dear to me. He says this to Durvas Muni. Bhagavan says, I have no independence. Now, he who is supremely independent, whose will is a fact, Bhagavan Krishna creates simply by his will to create, and it happens. Lord Vishnu simply by his glance injects jiva. So clearly independent. But he who is supremely independent says, I have no independence. I'm aham bhakta paradhina. I'm dependent on my bhakta. What my bhakta says, I must do. So what a dear devotee of Lord Krishna, pure devotee says, Krishna has to do. And if a dear devotee says, come down here, then Krishna has to do so. Krishna has to do so. So Advaita Acharya promises, I must make Krishna appear. I must make Krishna appear. And show Krishna to everyone. If I don't, then how can I be known as Advaita? The servant of Krishna. He made this promise, and it's an amazing promise. Who can make such a promise? Only because he's such a dear devotee of the Lord and expansion of Mahavishnu can that happen. Otherwise, no one can make Krishna appear. So, every day he's offering tulasi leaves and Ganga Jal to Shalagram. And he's crying. The Shastras, Krishna says that there's no way to repay the debt of someone who offers him tulsi and water. Lord Krishna says there's no wealth in my possession that is equal to a tulsi leaf and Ganga Jal. And one of the names of Sri Chaitanya, of Advaita Acharya is Nada. So Mahaprabhu says specifically, he reveals to Advaita Acharya. He reveals to the devotees, he says, Nadar Hunkara. Hunkara means loud, roaring, crying voice. That with this voice, Nada, Advaita Acharya called me. And my seat in the spiritual world, in the eternal abode, shook. So I couldn't stay there. I had to come down. He made me come down. He made me come down. So Mahaprabhu is revealing, that Advaita Acharya, through his potency and through his intense feelings by being an expansion of Mahavishnu, he was able to please Mahaprabhu and Aham Bhakta Pradhina, Mahaprabhu became dependent. Advaita Acharya, like I mentioned, was many years senior in age to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so Mahaprabhu would think of so Mahaprabhu knew that Advaita Acharya is a disciple of Puripad, Madhavendra Puri. And therefore, Mahaprabhu, being an exemplary devotee, right, Bhakta Rupa, to maintain proper display of codes of dharma, he would generally offer obeisances to Advaita Acharya. But Advaita Acharya considered Mahaprabhu his master and himself as the servant of Krishna, of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And because he feels that, generally he tried to explain that to every jiva, that you're all servants of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, be happy by that. So his Bhakta Avataram essentially means his mood of servitude. So that's the second tattva. The first is tattva is Maha Vishnu, expansion, and feeling the pain of the jivas because of the connection of jivas with Maha Vishnu. And the second is Bhakta Avataram. He will display this mood of a servant. Here in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it says, let's see, find it. I'm not finding it right now because I have the entire chapter, but he mentions that the concept of service to Krishna generates so much joy in a jiva that joy cannot be compared to anything else. And that's where Advaita Acharya will say things like, Nityananda and I are servants of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because of that joy of servitude. Just like Lakshmi Devi, oftentimes we think of Lakshmi Devi being at the chest of Lord Hari, but most times she's displayed at the feet of Lord Hari. Why? Because she's tasting the emotion of service of Hari. She's the goddess of fortune, but she actually is praying for the service of the Lord. Likewise, all the great devatas, Brahma, Shiva, etc., they're also very pleased with the mood of servitude of the Lord. So Sri Advaita Acharya feels that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu considers me his servant, considers himself my spirit, considers me his spiritual master based on his age, but I feel that I'm only a servant. So, love of Bhagwan is so great that it makes those that are superior, Bhagwan, and great associates, and those that are inferiors like us, and in this path, in this mood of Advaita Acharya, it brings everyone to the service of Krishna. Even Nanda Maharaj says this to Uddhava in Bhagavatam. He says, my dear Uddhav, please hear me, that Krishna is my son. Even if you think he's God, Krishna is my son. And no matter what, I still have feelings of love for my son. And may my mind and body be attached to your Lord Krishna. But may our mind be attached simply to the lotus feet of my son. We see this, that even the cowherd boys, oftentimes they had this mood of vira, chivalry with Lord Krishna. and intimacy. They would best him in wrestling, etc. But even they would massage his feet because of that joy of servitude. We even see that in the example of the gopis, the topmost devotees. Those whose feet Uddhav desired and who are more dear to Krishna than anyone else, they regard themselves as Krishna's servants. Srila Prabhupada says in Bhagavatam, he says, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, once he took sannyas, never associated with a mata to uphold the principles of sannyas. But even though he was like that, he regarded the mood of the gopis, who were matas, as the most elevated devotees. So this is very interesting. This mood of servitude gives great joy, and it's the highest of, in many ways, the highest of rasas, and also the safest of all rasas. Hard to commit an offense when one is in a mood of service. And so where is this mood of servitude coming through in Advaita Acharya and all these great associates of Lord? It's coming through Balaramji, the main expansion of Lord Krishna. And through Balaramji comes Sankarshan. Also in the mood of service. Through Sankarshan comes Mahavishnu in the mood of service. And therefore, Mahavishnu, since he's expanding through Balaramji, he carries that mood of service to his Lord Krishna, always. And so Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami points out this. He says, Pitamata Guru Sakabhava Kena Nai Krishna Premara Swabhave Dasya Bhava Se Karai. All the emotions, whether those of father, mother, teacher, or friend, are full of sentiments of servitude. That is the nature of love of Krishna. And that same Krishna has descended in the form of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Everyone, therefore, is a servant. And so we see through Balaram, Shankarshan, Mahavishnu, Lakshman, Advaita Acharya, that they're always acting as devotees in a mood of servitude, even though they're so elevated. So here's something that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says. He says, He sabaka shastra kahe bhaktavatar, bhaktavatar pada upari sabara. The scriptures call them incarnations as devotees, bhakta avatar. Notice this? This is the second truth, Advaita Acharya, bhakta avatar. The position of being such an incarnation is above all others. Srila Prabhupada writes something very nice that I will highlight here. So he says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears in different incarnations, but his appearance in the role of a devotee, right? You notice everybody in the Panchatattva is Bhakta Avatar, Bhakta Shaktikam, Bhakta Rupa, etc. We saw this right here. Bhakta Rupa, Bhakta Sarup, Bhakta Avataram, Bhakti, and Bhakta Shaktikam. That all of when he appears in the role of devotee, it is actually more beneficial to a conditioned soul than other incarnations with all the opulences. Why? Because sometimes a conditioned soul is bewildered when he tries to understand incarnation of God without full opulence like Krishna Bhagavan. Many people mistake the activities of Krishna Bhagavan.
That's why you cannot understand Krishna Lila without understanding Krishna Tattva. That's why Srila Prabhupada says we must read the first 9 cantos systematically before delving into Krishna Lila, because that will give us the purity and the intelligence to understand Krishna and the devotion to understand Krishna Lila. So Lord Krishna appeared and performed many uncommon activities, and some materialists misunderstood him. But in his appearance as Lord Chaitanya, he did not show much of his opulences. Therefore, fewer conditioned souls were bewildered. So very nice. So Lord Krishna considers his devotees greater than himself, as we saw in the pastime of Narayana, Dhruvas Muni, and Ambrish Maharaj. And the sweetness of Krishna is tasted through mood of servitude. Example being Balramji, Maha, Vishnu, Lakshmanji, Advaita Acarya, the cowherd boys, the gopis, Nanda Maharaj, Yashoda Mai. So Lord Krishna tries, and even Lord Krishna himself understands this, because he tries to taste his sweetness, but he can't do so without accepting the emotions, not necessarily just the form, but the emotions of a devotee. And so he accepts the role of a devotee as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Bhakta Rupa, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepts the emotions of a devotee in order to actually taste the sweetness of his service. That's one of the reasons. So those were the two main things I wanted to, for my own self, understand about Advaita Acharya. What's the importance of his being the expansion of Mahavishnu? He could feel the pain of all the jivas and their suffering. Why? Because all the jivas are coming through Mahavishnu. And therefore he could plead for Lord Krishna to descend in the mood of servitude, Bhakta Avatar. So I will show something. Prabhu, for some reason, I seem to have lost my Zoom control. Let me see how I can.
Make sure to.
Do I just go into Zoom and see whether I can view the? Okay, here, I got it. Forgive me for my ignorance. I'm going to share a comment by Srila Bhaktisanta Maharaj. So here's Srila Bhaktisanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. He writes, forgetting our service to Krishna, we have become masters. We wanted to become masters. And in this material world provided us with the opportunity. This world is perfectly arranged for that purpose. But mastership is not our constitutional position. Rather, it is the tendency of the conditioned souls. There's no peace in following one's conditioning. Peace can only be attained by practicing devotional service, by considering oneself a servant of Krishna. Forgetting our service to Krishna, we became masters. And the world is arranged for that purpose, but it's not our nature. And Advaita Acharya is showing that to be the case by his personal example. Now, I will try to show something very nice, and I'll end with this. Narottam Vilas Prabhu, my Google is visible, yes? Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah, we can see it's continue.
Okay, so this is, I'm sure many of you have heard of this pastime, but it's really touching. It's written by one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, Mula Prakriti Devi Dasi. And it's a collection of stories, like a collection, some remnants of remembrance of Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada, it's called Srila Prabhupada Visits Advaita Acharya's house. I'll just read it because it's so beautiful. In 1980, the head priest from Sri Advaita Acharya's house in Shantipur, that's what this is showing, in West Bengal came to ISKCON Mayapur, carrying with him a copy of Back to Godhead article about Srila Prabhupada entitled A Lifetime in Preparation. And he told the devotees in Mayapur, he said, just recently an amazing realization occurred to me that I wanted to share with the devotees everywhere. I've been a pujari at the house of Advaita Acharya for many years. I was also there back in the 1940s and 1950s. At that time, I noticed that one Grihastha, Bengali devotee, used to come to the temple quite regularly. He was dressed in white dhoti and kurta, and he always came alone. He would sit in back of the mandir and without speaking would chant Hari Nam on his mala very quietly and very deeply. I noticed that he came on weekends, usually once every month or two in regular way. After chanting there for many hours, he would always thank me when he left. His presence was profound and I became attracted to him. Since his devotions were solitary, I never spoke to disturb him. Sometimes I happened to notice that while he was chanting, his eyes would be full of tears and his voice would be choked up. Then for a very long time, he did not come. However, I distinctly recall that in August of 1965, I saw a saffron-clad sannyasi sitting in the back of the mandir. In a moment, I recognized him to be my old friend from before. Again, he sat for a long time chanting Hare Krishna. I could see his beads moving, his eyes closed in concentration, devotion. He was weeping unabashedly, even more than he used to when he took the holy name. Finally, as evening came, he paid his dandavat pranam for a long time. When he arose, he came up to me and thanked me for my seva here at Advaita Bhavan. I asked him, who are you? I remember you from so long ago. He replied, my name is Abhaya Charana Vrinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj. I'm the unworthy disciple of His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, my divine master. I've come here for such a long time because my Gurudev has given me an impossible mission. His desire was for me to cross the ocean to Western countries and spread the sublime teachings of Sri Chaitanya Dev. There are countless souls there who have never heard of Shri Shri Radha Krishna, and so they are suffering greatly. I do not know how this mission will be successful, so I've been coming here to this special house at Advaita Acharya where he, Nityananda Prabhu and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would gather to plan the Sankirtan congregational chanting of Krishna's name movement. It was here that they launched the inundation of love of God that swept India and continues to this day. Thus, I've been praying very earnestly here that they will all give me their mercy and somehow they will empower me and guide me. I want to satisfy my Gurudev's desire, but I'm feeling unqualified to do this. As he was speaking to me, I saw tears falling down on his cheeks again. Then he continued, tomorrow I'm leaving for Calcutta to go upon a ship across the ocean to America. I do not know what will befall me there, but I'm praying most earnestly here for help. Then he very humbly asked me for my blessings. I was indeed moved by this Vaishnava's sincerity and determination as I watched him depart from his journey. It was a few years later that I began noticing for the first time white Vaishnavas coming to Advaita Bhavan. They were in dhoti saris chanting. I never spoke to any of them, but one of them gave me this Back to Godhead magazine. As I looked at the photograph, suddenly I recognized a painting of the founder Acharya who brought Krishna consciousness to the West. It was a picture of my friend, Bhaktivedanta Swami, who had come and prayed here so many times before. Then I realized that he was actually accomplished
the impossible mission of his Gurudev. I saw that it was indeed he, starting alone and without pretense, who accomplished the glorious miracle against all odds. As soon as I saw this, I came here to this temple of Mayapur to tell you this information. I know he is gone from this world now, but I thought you might want to know this story about your and my beloved Srila Prabhupada. Excerpted from the book Srila Prabhupada, a friend to all, Mula Prakriti Devi Dasi. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Advaita Acarya ki jai. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Shri Vancha Kalpatrubhyacha Pipo Sindhabhyevacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha. Thank you very much. It's 12:30. The curtain hasn't opened yet. Would anybody like to add other things that they know about Advaita Acharya or want to share about Advaita Acharya or questions? I don't have qualification about Advaita Tattva. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I never turned on my video. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much for the wonderful lecture, Prabhu. It's amazing. Thank you so much for enlightening us about the glories of Sri Advaita Acharya. One pastime which I really love is, I think you touched upon this topic as well, Prabhu. So Mahaprabhu used to consider Sri Advaita Acharya as his spiritual master because he was a disciple of Sri Ishwara Puri, Madhavendra Puri.
Yes.
And Mahaprabhu's spiritual master Ishwara was his blood brother, so he considers him as his spiritual master, as good as his spiritual master.
Yes.
But Advaita Acharya did not like that. He wanted him to recognize him as his devotee, so he used to speak Apasampradaya Mayavad philosophy to enrage Mahaprabhu, and purposefully. So we're reading Chaitanya Bhagavat. He used to read Yoga Vasishtha, Mayavadi, and then teach, speak about Yoga Vasishtha to other people, and Mahaprabhu really got angry, and he came. Mahaprabhu was hearing this, and one time he was just enough. That's it. He went to Madhavendra Acharya's house and said, which is better, impersonal or the personal form? And Advaita Acharya, thought nonchalantly, he said, of course, impersonal form. And he got so angry. He was sitting in Vyasasan. He just came, he's bent. He just dragged him down to the Vyasasan, sat him on his chest like Narasimhadev. And I just pounding him left and right. and Sita Thakurani was, she was scared. He's going to die. He's going to be killed. Yes. But Advaita Acharya was having the time of his life, you'd say. He was just smiling, beaming. Finally, if you think as a spiritual master, he wouldn't do this. Finally, you accepted me as a servant. You're so happy. So the mood of the Advaita Acharya, I just love the pastime. How amazing it is. So,
yeah, there are a lot. I like that pastime very much. There's a pastime of where, Advaita Acharya made it rain so that when he had invited Mahaprabhu to his home and he cooked a massive feast, that none of Mahaprabhu's sannyasa associates would come. And Mahaprabhu figured it out. He goes, Advaita, I know you, you're Indra. And so because you're Mahavishnu, you were able to get the rains to come so nobody would come with me so you could feed me. I know your intent very well. And, there's that pastime. There's a pastime where Sachi Mata, the mother of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, unknowingly offended Advaita Acharya in the instructions. Yeah, there are many, many pastimes. Yes. I was, impossible to cover all them in 1 hour. So I thought for myself, let me try to understand a little bit of Advaita Tattva. So, but thank you for explaining that. Like Chaitanya Bhagavat is so beautiful and it's written in such a beautiful language that, Bhaktisanta Maharaj used to request his disciples to be well versed in Chaitanya Bhagavat, Prem Bhakti Chandrika. Those were the 2 main books that were required. Thank you for sharing that wonderful pastime of Advaita Acharya. Any other comments? The altar is still closed. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Advaita Acharya ki jai. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadda Shivasati Gaur Bhaktinda. So the temple door is open at the, where we were doing it through the double white doors. So you can come, and we're going to have kirtan now, or arti. So Narottam Vilas Prabhu, is a video from Mayapur TV working? Yes. So Sudhapran Prabhu just went inside the altar and he's opening the altar. I don't think anybody signed up for a kirtan that I saw on the list that Tulsi sent. So we'll play the kirtan on the temple audio. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Please come join. Next week is the appearance of Nityananda Prabhu. And so we hope to have a regular Sunday feast with observance of that. Thank you.